All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of Behind the Visual, where I, your host, advertising and lifestyle photographer Mark Hansen, interview all those people responsible for creating those images and videos you see out in the world every single day. And today, my guest is Michele Romero, and Michele is the former senior photo editor at Entertainment Weekly. She was there since the beginning of Entertainment Weekly. So we hear all kinds of stuff from her. I mean, the stories are never ending and amazing. We talk about a cover shoot she did with Amy Schumer. We talk about a shoot she did with Celine Dion to commemorate the Titanic movie. We talk about her working with tons of amazing photographers. We She tells us about being backstage with Kiss and what that was like, and Kiss's Gene Simmons' mom showing up to give Gene Simmons something right as he showed up in full Kiss costume. We talk about David Bowie. We talk about her sketches that she did for shoots. We talk about the covers of tons of Entertainment Weekly magazines, from Stephen Colbert doing a Lord of the Rings cover to Walking Dead covers to, pretty much Breaking Bad, the cover for that. I mean, she has met everybody and she has a cool story about a lot of it. So she even tells us a little story about TLC and what happened on set when she was with those girls. And it was a pretty big deal at the time. So we also hear a little bit about Danny Trejo's decapitated head. So definitely check this one out. Lots of really great stories. I think you're going to love this one, and I look forward to hearing what you guys think about it. Like it, thumbs up it, subscribe to it, leave me a comment, do something, and just let me know what you think. Kind of go, I shoot everywhere. But we thought about moving to New York, but we had already had my oldest daughter, and it's like, I'm not moving to New York. I can be there in 5 hours if I have to. I'll just stay in Charlotte.
Yeah, you made the right choice.
Yeah.
It's like, because it's not ultimately, I don't think it's a great place to raise kids. Now, I grew up outside the city, and the town I grew up in was, there were only 100 kids in our class, 50 boys, 50 girls. It was a square mile. It felt like a small town, which it was. But then it was 30-minute train ride to the city,
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it worked out. It was perfect and, perfect. And then went off to school in the middle of nowhere. So I got that out of my system. And then back in New York, and, I had a very long career at Entertainment Weekly.
Are you still at Entertainment Weekly?
No, I left the magazine 2 years ago because ultimately, it changed so much. It was sold to Meredith.
Yeah.
Moved to Los Angeles. Magazine industry is not what it was. So
sure.
The kind of work I got to do, which is a lot of concepts, and basically you're making movie posters. I mean, I loved doing concepts. So the money's not there to do that anymore. The interest is not there to do it anymore. Although I think there is, but I'm not sure that the current generation of photo people know how to pull that off. I mean, your movie studio people still can do it, and there's some great agencies out here that are doing amazing work, but you'll see it mostly for billboards and mostly TV. It's not even, movies aren't even that interesting, their advertising work.
Yeah. I think now you say that, you're right. Yeah, I think about most of the TV shows are the ones with the cool artwork and photography and whatever, and the movies are kind of
Yeah, I mean, they're selling kind of a different thing, and now that we are streaming most of them, I mean, your advertising for streaming is now like a little tiny box, or maybe a wide, assets for the internet, etc. But I think they're still being creative on a lot of shows like American Horror Story and all the FX stuff that Ryan Murphy did. Like, you can see they're really trying with ideas. Sometimes I see things I worked on because I know they're references for a shoot. Or that I know the photographer whose work was reassembled or repurposed.
repurposed. Speaking of
homage.
photographers, who have you worked with? I know you and Art Stryber. I've had Art on the podcast. That dude's very cool. But so I know you guys. I see he's following you on Instagram because I see he likes your stuff.
Yeah,
But
we're really great friends. So, and I loved working with Art. So what I got to do is Entertainment Weekly privileged me with making magazine covers that had concepts, and there are only a few people that really could pull that off, and Art was one of them. Like, you'd also send Art in for problem solving because there were a lot of problems.
believe it.
You're navigating a lot of talent. We don't have the same budgets as this movie studio. You've got approvals that need to go first through the magazine, then to the studio, and then to the talent. And there's, we had a really good record of getting ideas through. And I really enjoyed that process also, like pitches and sketches. And magazines, I think, are the only place where, I had a lot of autonomy. My bosses would let me come up with ideas, present them. There were, elements added to the soup, of course. But the collaboration on a set was tremendous. And Art's a real professional. And
Mhm.
I actually do have a separation with like a professional photographer. To me, at that level, is like a surgeon, not doing brain surgery, obviously, but there's a certain skill that you should learn,
Oh
like
yeah.
lighting. For one, lighting is my number one. And I think it's a mistake. I think what's upsetting to me is seeing kids who are very young launching without any desire to learn more.
Yeah.
Photography you can kind of learn for the rest of your life, and certainly be inspired by older stuff. So back to Art Stryber, very funny, in a kind of old school Hollywood way. He wears a jacket and a white shirt and jeans and boots on every shoot, including we did 2 Walking Dead shoots because I inherited that franchise.
Yeah.
Or I worked on that show for like I think 8 years, doing magazine covers. And we went the first year, second year was him, and then I think the last one. So we bookended it, but it was hurricane heat, middle of nowhere, Georgia. We're in the woods, and Art is in his jacket, his shirt, and I'm like I don't even know, like drenched, ugly clothes.
Right.
I'm like, I look like that person was dragged out of the woods. And I don't think he sweats either. I believe I said that to him. So he's a massive problem solver. He understands light. When we had one issue where there was a hurricane coming through. We had on the pre-light, and there was one setup where the entire the main characters, I think it was the 100th episode of Walking Dead. So we were celebrating the show, and we went off character. So they were all dressed up, and the idea was based on the Rolling Stones cover Beggar's Banquet, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was that
Beggar's
the one where
Banquet.
it looked like you had the red velvet cake smashed
Yeah,
all over?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
That was
cover.
I actually had cake on me starting in the morning because Norman Reedus there's pictures of me with like cake all. And by the way, I didn't have a trailer to go to, so I had to go to a sink in the production offices and like wash my like at 10 in the morning. And we had a whole day of shooting,
Oh
so I had
wow.
like sugar in my. Anyway, that's a digression, of which there'll be a lot. But so one of the things we wanted to do is this tableau. We planned. We had a locations that we scouted in the woods, and we built this table. And Art said, it's going to rain tomorrow. We're not gonna be able to do that shot. And I said to him, because I always like challenging the photographers, I was like, oh, I actually think you can do it. I think you can pull this off. So that like inspires him to really problem solve.
Right.
And I love watching him because in fact, like we actually got to work with Walking Dead crew because you're on a set. So it's union
Oh yeah.
crew. And obviously they're super professional. And you get to work with the prop master and effects guys. And that was super fun. But he measured out, we had a table that we dressed with all the stuff we were going to move into the studio. We got, let me say we set it up with, stunt people or stand-ins. And he measured out like everything from where the camera was to the tables and it had to be exact. So then the prop guys reset that. They built that in a studio, in a soundstage, same setup, same dressing on the table. And the lighting had to match what the outdoor lighting was, which
Right.
Art knew how to do. I would have been lost. And the amazing part too is that the prop guys brought in sand, I mean dirt and tree, like whatever was on the ground covering. And then the actors came in, had like a food fight at certain points, but that was really gratifying because you cannot tell that they're actually outside. You can't tell at all. And to me, working with art opens up possibilities of what we can do. And there are limitations too, but it's like, hey, what if we had this guy fly balloons over, New Jersey? You can
Right.
kind of pull stuff like that up. And that's been a really gratifying journey because I started my career. I actually have an issue of the first Photoshop thing I ever worked on was Celine Dion for Titanic, and it was very basic, but I wanted her floating in the middle of the ocean on like Louis Vuitton luggage. That's a sidebar. I sidebar a lot.
That's fine.
And we built like a giant, basically like a kiddie pool, but really wide.
Right.
And the water, the bottom was black, so it looked like it was night, and there was maybe a starry backdrop. It was very basic, but I remember looking at the monitor. Was there a monitor? Or looking at it and being like, wow, looks like she's in the middle of the ocean. And it looks photoshopped, but it was easy to build up. She's sitting on top of luggage, and I love the idea. And that was like wow, we can actually do all this stuff where previously we'd have limitations. Like
Right.
obviously I couldn't take her out to the ocean.
Yeah.
She might have gone. But yeah, and so working with art, you have an additional tool, which is we can do anything we want. Like you can have an idea that extends, to live animals that you're going to shove in there, but the talent aren't there. There's a lot of magic. And what I like to say is I like pictures I call permanent pictures. That means like in 20 years, you want to look at it again.
Yeah.
And in 2021 now, everything's disposable. It's like, first of all, we're looking at images in like 2 by 2 inches or 3, whatever the measurements are. And even on the TV, you're looking at little boxes of whatever the key art is for the program. Yeah. And so to have been able to make things that ran a sizable, that ran in a large format was very amazing because everything mattered. Easter eggs mattered. You looked at it large. So one of my favorite shoots that Art did, which I didn't work on, although I'm going to claim I started on it.
All right.
So I got to talk to him. This is like I'm such an arrogant person there, but he did it, and the editor was Ariel, a woman named Ariel Brown. I'm remembering her last name. Yeah. Anyway, so they did the cast of Arrested Development, and the idea was that they would do them as like an old, not Renaissance, but an old, oil painting of this family, but it was maybe like 1700s. And they're all like really dressed up. There's a large spotted Doberman. There are dogs in the picture. There's Will Arnett is tossing a dove in the air. And it's one photograph like I own. I mean, I own a bunch of photographs that I've worked on. I love that picture so much because it doesn't matter who the cast are. It doesn't re-reference the show, so it dates. It makes me happy every time I look at it. And there's so many elements to it because you have to, each person should be doing something,
right,
so that your eye wants to look at the whole thing and stay on it. So I love that picture, and I'm glad it was made, and they had the money to make it at that time.
God,
and what desire.
I mean, you have really worked on some cool stuff. And I was just looking at what you have on your website and just those images from those covers that you have on there. I mean, it's amazing, the stuff you got to put together. And I'm assuming the budgets were decent, at least at the time. And I mean,
you'd be surprised. They weren't like, we didn't have as much money. And there were moments where it was like, you got to do this for $5,000 all in. And what that does is it makes you kind of more creative, or like you have to problem solve in different ways.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I agree. Those shoots where you don't have any cash are the ones, sometimes they're more fun. I think, because
Yeah.
you actually have to do some work where if you have a huge budget, you just go, yeah, let's just do that, that, and that. And you go shoot it, and it's still fun. And I love those, but those lower budget ones, they make your brain spin a
Yeah,
little
and you just
more.
say everyone's eating a sandwich and they have to bring it from home.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, you end up cutting stuff. But for a long time, there were really fantastic budgets. And the nice thing about Entertainment Weekly was that the talent cooperated because it wasn't a gossip magazine. We just
Right.
focused on a project. So your record album, your movie, and it was pretty straightforward in that regard. Um, and so there were just moments where talent got used to Entertainment Weekly with a big idea and something that was like, break the internet is a phrase that's really not true because the
Right.
internet has always continued to work. Um, but the idea was you're giving something to fans, and if they're not a fan of the franchise, they're going to be interested in what's going on here. Like, why should I know about this? So, in fact, we were shooting the cast. It was maybe also 100th episode, or had to be more, of Grey's Anatomy, and we got to shoot in the hospital,
Oh, wow.
on the hospital set, which actually felt like a giant hospital. It's a huge set. And the day, like 2 days before or a day before, one of the leads set, her people sent me a note that was like, she wants to do a big concept. We had like 5 different covers of groupings, and you'll see it on the website. But I was like, am I a concept machine? And it's that like anxiety, but a push towards figuring it out. I got to come up with an idea for her. And so we ended up with, there's a designer named Hervé Leger who used to have this Band-Aid dress that women wore in like the 80s.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, what if we did a wrap dress, but it's an EKG paper, like, so, and that we figured out, but my niece was staying with me. So I was like, come here. And I wrapped her up in, like, we got, the paper that comes out of an adding machine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, so we just went to Staples or got, like, I tried to home make it, but that worked out so beautifully because her stylist, or the stylist we had on set, no, the tailor we had on set that the stylist hired was the same tailor that this woman worked with for whatever her dresses were for, Emmys and whatnot.
Oh, wow.
And he wrapped it beautifully. And if you don't have that like professional element, it could look like a shitty mummy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I cursed. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You're like, and that worked out, and I was super happy with it because I'm like, this is a great idea. And then you get responses immediately. And so I'm going to circle back to Walking Dead. There was
I'm going to share, while you're talking, I'm going to share my screen and show what you're talking about as well. Okay, go ahead. So this is the EKG dress.
Well done.
Yeah.
So that's what it looks like. So good for you, man. And that I think is an older version, but yeah, so the Grey's Anatomy cover, you can see, that looks really cool, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, while I was scrolling through here, I was like, okay, these are cool. And I stopped when I got to that. And then this whole row here with the Walking Dead, and then the Stephen Colbert deal.
Yeah. So the Colbert story is pretty amazing because Entertainment Weekly was doing an interview about the last Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movie. And rather than go back to Peter Jackson and just do, a movie set piece with his interview, an amazing movies editor named Sean Smith came up with the idea to have a super fan interview Peter Jackson and dress up as his favorite characters. And the super fan is Stephen Colbert. And then because we were working with Weta Films, which is Peter Jackson's production company, they sent from New Zealand like a container of wardrobe, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
It was original. Like I actually wore, I'm sure it was a duplicate, but the Lord of the ring. I was like, look, I got it. I'm invisible, yeah. You can see Bilbo has it.
I see that. Yeah.
So it was great. Colbert's amazing, obviously. And he was super thrilled. And we did a wardrobe fitting in his office the previous day. And when he put on the Legolas, hair and the costume, he was like almost crying, gave me a big hug, was, you know, you have no idea how much this means to me kind of thing. So I was, wow, we're making him happy. That's awesome. But then he's an improv guy. So the improv actors, comedians generally are amazing because they'll go to town. And we had an entire day to shoot him. The photographer was Ruben Afanador,
Oh
who
yeah.
people think of as like a beauty photographer.
Yeah, that's what
But
I was gonna
I
say, because to me, he's very vibrant, very beauty,
yeah,
very
people
fashion,
think of
and
him that way, but Ruben has a sense of humor because I know Ruben, and I didn't want it to look like a jokey thing. I wanted to treat it seriously, and you know, Ruben is a lighter. It was like that was a shoot that went on all day, and there were so many images that were wonderfully usable. And then the one like stressor on this shoot was that Peter Jackson's people needed us to have movie quality hair and makeup people, like so an effects makeup person,
oh
because it had to
yeah,
look really good, and a hair person, like a proper wig person. Now in New York, you have Saturday Night Live and Broadway, where you might get a wig and makeup person, right?
right.
But I didn't want it to look like shitty Halloween. Not that that looks like shitty Halloween, but it's very different than you know, superhero stuff.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I forget who gave me we worked with this great guy, and I'm forgetting his name, but he had just worked on Spider-Man. So I was like, all right, that guy's going to be amazing. And I actually talked to Amy Sedaris, who I've gotten to work for because she knows her way around a wig. And you know, who's your wig person? So we flew up this woman, and I wish I could remember her name too, from North Carolina, actually, because there's a
Really.
school of film. I think it's in Raleigh. And she, you know, flew her up from North Carolina, and she did look at how great these wigs are.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
amazing.
and that what you learn over time is once you work with a crappy wig and it ruins the whole thing for you in your head, you can't go back, because each of these pieces, you know, obviously took time, but you know, the ears had to be put on and they're seamless.
Yeah.
Bilbo, which you don't see here, but he had to put those hobbit feet on, which are these big rubber, they look like, you know, ugly boots, but that has to be seamless. So it was so much fun. And the other thing, like one of the tricks of photography that I learned early on is to play music for talent, right? And if you play the right kind of music, you're going to get people to do things. It's a surprise, you know. So one of the things, because I did a lot of music, one of the songs two songs always worked that I put on for anyone. One was Guns N' Roses, Welcome to the Jungle,
Yeah.
because a rock band they were like, we love this song, you know, whatever. And so they would be in a better mood. And the other is Prince Purple Rain. So
Oh
that,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I have had Kelly Clarkson singing that, you know, and it's interesting because you've got someone singing a song that you cannot record, you know, but
Right.
so back to the Lord of the Rings. So when he was Bilbo, I was like, put this song on. And so we launched into Beyonce's Put a Ring on It, you know, and there's footage online of Colbert doing the Beyonce dance for that. Like, you know,
Really.
he's so good. And I believe I'm laughing so hard you can hear me in the video footage, and so his publicist, but like it went on like that. And when he's Legolas, we have him playing a cello, and then the music is some kind of classical Bach. I'm going to get that wrong. And he's like really into it. You know, my boss, Lisa Berman at the time, she had a really great idea. Like, what if Bilbo is getting a pedicure, right? Or maybe it was Ruben's idea. I don't know whose idea it was, but Lisa ran out and went to a nail salon, paid a woman $100 to do those toes. And that's a great picture, you know. I had an idea for Jerry Seinfeld, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I didn't work on the shoot, but I gave them a notion, which was like to give him a Starbucks cup, but it would just say Terry instead of Jerry, you know. And he
Right.
rejected that idea, which is the beauty of that is the idea is not dead, right? And then it turns out I gave it to Stephen Colbert, which he loved, and he was Randolph instead of Gandalf, you know. And it's like so gratifying because like he's laughing at something I'm pitching to him.
Yeah.
And then I took his drink order, and he was like, peppermint gingerbread, goat milk, triple shot latte. what Gandalf would order, goat milk,
Right.
and you see that picture, and I've written on that's my handwriting on the cup. Amazingly gratifying, as you can imagine, and that yielded what probably 20 images that were unique.
Wow.
And that was the beauty of, like, once you got going and working with improv people, it went on forever. And the joy was like, you could tell it, there was joy in the room. The reader was going to freak out about it. In other words, if the energy you put in is happy and joyful, the reader will go that way too. So back to Walking Dead. I think it was the second or third time I went there. There was a photographer who did work that was multiple image, like, Dylan Coulter is his name. And so I wanted each character, like Dylan did a lot of sports, like, so a golfer with multiple images, and he did it digitally. In olden times, they did it with strobe lights,
Yeah.
And so Norman Reedus, and we were doing solo pictures of them, but I wanted the solo pictures to look like Abaddon had wandered, like zombie Abaddon, or not zombie, zombie apocalypse Abaddon, was doing his version of American West and photographing this cast, and they were going to be like kind of broken down and downtrodden, not like a happy smiley. I didn't want key art again.
Right.
So for Norman, I'd gotten to know Norman a little bit because he's a photographer and we would talk about photography. And so I asked him, without getting publicist approval first, like on the fly, he said, "Hey, I've got this idea. Would you do it? I want to write on your shirt, like Daryl Dixon had a Sharpie and wrote on his shirt, 'Bite me,' right? So 'Bite me,' I wrote on the shirt. It was like a James Purse, probably $100 t-shirt. And then the makeup people ripped it up, like they zombified it, is what I'm going to call it. And it was fascinating watching. They cut the sleeves, they have a razor blade, they make holes in it. They have a makeup palette that has like grass color and dirt and blood. And there's 'Bite me' on the far right. So that's my handwriting, right?
Oh,
And you
okay.
can see the shirt was a gray shirt, and now it's got sweat stains, and it's all like oils that they spray on it. And he's looking the way he looks, but the pulling the sleeves off gives us some arm. It's a little sexy, and obviously it's a double entendre. 'Bite me,' what a wonderful thing to get to do
Right.
for a zombie show. This was the highest seller of that franchise. It may have been like a big seller for the magazine too. I don't remember the numbers. But what happens here is fans right away, it goes crazy on the internet.
Mhm.
Then AMC then makes a mug with that handwriting, t-shirt, mouse pad, because the next
Oh,
time we go,
wow.
they're selling all this merch. And I don't own the rights to my own handwriting because I'm
Yeah.
working for a company, and then we're working with a company. So it's fine because it's funny to me. And then people made like little Funko dolls.
Did you at least get
Fans
some of it? They
made,
give it to you? Like
I'm
give you
sorry,
some,
what?
did you get at least some free stuff, like a free mug or a shirt with a "Bite me" on it? Since you,
No, but guess what? I could write that on a mug. I mean,
yeah,
it didn't,
it's
like,
true.
I'm just, I got the handwriting, and I actually did it to look a little like it was rough, but it still had to be readable.
Yeah.
We ended up auctioning that shirt off for charity, and I think it made 10 grand. So
Wow.
that was a nice part of
That's
that.
cool.
And I carried it home in like a bag on the airplane. I was like, "Don't, this is worth 10,000." I don't know how much it was, whatever. We didn't know how much
Right.
it was going to make at that time. So it then became like, you look up on the internet, 'Bite me' for a while people did their own versions of it, of the t-shirt. So on Etsy, you would see like a lot of different versions of it. People tattooed the image on them. People tattooed an image that we did of Andrew Lincoln with like a knife at his face that was, the reference was Outlaw Josie Wales, the Clint Eastwood movie poster.
Right.
So that demonstrated to me the power of fandom, and that Entertainment Weekly, the goal of a cover for any franchise was like, you are giving something to fans that hopefully they haven't seen before, but they're going to get excited about it. So while I was working on Walking Dead, and I'm about to put another, like, because it's the last season, I'm going to put together some aggregate images. I got like immediately, Norman posted and tagged me, and I looked at my phone, and it was like followers. I think I got like 2,000 followers that day.
Wow.
And so then you just see, okay, now I've got to give them more content. And it's really, that's a joyful part. It's like, it's not for me. I work with photographers who know that they're going to like pull this thing off, and then they'll have rights to an image that is maybe got resale, you know. And so it was tremendously gratifying to work with talent, you know, putting Amy Schumer in a giant, you know, like, I would say coffin, but like that of mini bottles, you know, and that was another evolution of concept that just worked out, you know, and that you agreed to do. I'll go a little history on that shoot.
Yeah.
So that was for
Pull it
Trainwreck.
up, dude. That
And
was a train wreck.
yeah, so, and that character was like a, you know, a drunken kind of character, very funny.
There we are.
She's in a, there it is, the first image. There we go. So
Wow.
what's amazing about that
Are those mini bottles photoshopped in any way, or is it really all?
No, it's all in camera.
Holy hell.
But so what we did was, the first concept came, I wanted actually to her character to have food wrappers, like, you know,
Oh yeah.
you know, all this food stuff, because I think that had been part of the character in the film too, and that got rejected, and I understand that. And so there, the reference was Bette Midler. I think Annie Leibovitz shot for Rolling Stone with like the roses all over her, and she's wearing a black dress, and it's shot from above. And so I assumed from my pitch that Amy Schumer would be in a black like cocktail dress, like a short dress. And when we got to the shoot, first of all, there's 3,000 bottles, mini bottles of alcohol that the prop stylist, who did an amazing job, got. They built this like wooden box, filled it, and there's no, you know, it's really filled up, as you can see.
Yeah.
There's no like negative space or holes or anything you had to fill back in. And then they double stick taped bottles to her top and her bottom. She said, oh, I just assumed I'd be naked. And I was like, what? You know, and I didn't pitch it that way. So this is Amy knowing what was going to be a great picture.
Yeah.
And this is a gift. So I remember running back to the office with like a picture on my phone and showing it to my boss. And I was like, you're going to just love me for the rest of your life. And this, as you can imagine, again, did very, very well. I love that there are bottles in her hair, and that the hair goes over the logo. And Kieran Evesky was the designer who was he did such great work. It's like the perfect, her hand is going over the A and the M. And this was a real highlight era of EW. And then I'll tell you that after the day we wrapped, we had 3,000 mini bottles of alcohol, right?
I was going to ask, what did you do with all those?
What did we do with them? And so the prop person comes up to me and she said, well, we usually donate leftover stuff to a schools or a men's shelter. And I was like, you know what? Those options are not good ones.
Yeah, probably
not. I want
not.
to be responsible. So we ended up donating them to the it's a not-for-profit called New York Cares, and they do a lot of great charitable work in the city, and they have benefits. So this was giving them a bunch of free booze for their benefits to raise money. Again, we were very charitable in our contribution. It's actually funny that two of them had that thing, but I believe Paramount then bought this. I think it was Paramount, for their use. Like they used it somehow in the ad campaign.
Oh wow.
So that was again, like super gratifying. How can you not be excited about this kind of picture?
Yeah. I mean, you really did come up with some amazing covers. Did you sketch them all out? Because I saw.
Yeah, I have sketches on my website. That is the new one, and it's hard to navigate because I'm not finished with it. I do have a section that has sketches, and I believe it's michelleromero.studio.
Okay.
It's all like a Squarespace kind of mess. Does that come up?
I'm gonna type it in real quick.
Orange.
Yes. Yep, it's orange.
And if you go down, I think there's a thing that says concepts.
I want to share the screen so we can.
Okay, so scroll down.
Yep, concepts.
And concepts, click on there, see if this works. So Veep,
oh
yeah,
yeah.
you can see it. And then you can scroll right. But so Veep the idea with Veep was, and they're pretty close.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. So Veep was great because we were doing multiple covers that was the end of like the final season. And the idea for this was based on Richard Avedon did for the Richard Nixon administration. He did portraits of politicians that ran in Rolling Stone. I think it was like 1974. And I love photography. I know a lot about photography history and references. So when you pitch something like that and you're saying Avedon, politics, you are pitching to a very smart team, and this
Yes.
got approved. Now, I also, because this administration, the Selena Myers administration, was like a ship of fools. So you have everything had to be slightly comedic or just like a notion that would be funny on its own. Because again, you've got amazing actors who will improv. So the shot where Jonah Ryan, this is actually interesting, Jonah Ryan and Selena Myers are in the two shot. I then added Tony Hale because he's just freaking funny,
Yeah, it's
so to
great.
have him, like, he's on the side ready to hand Selena a bottle of water and she's oblivious while Jonah is like making some inane point. And adding Tony Hale, like, that's when on set you get like a notion, you're like, oh, that's going to be really super fun. And they love it, and it's a great picture. Now you'll notice that we had the presidential seals on the sketch.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
illegal to use those, so we had to scrap those, and that's fine because they're wearing red and blue suits, and you get what they're doing.
Absolutely.
I think there's one. Is there one with the baby? That's really funny.
Let's see.
I guess the baby's not here.
Yeah.
No, the baby's not on this one. I need to put the baby back. So the baby was actually a girl, and it was playing a boy baby, but that's okay. We're all fluid now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you can see it's just the idea of that references each character. So if you scroll down, you can see there's this GIF of or GIF, however you want it, and this isn't that section's not fully done. You can see it's got the so episode's not done, but so each of these characters, the goal, I think there are 12 covers or 9 covers, whatever the number is, and each character, you want them to do something, right? And you want them to do something towards their own character that's diverse, so they all shouldn't be just looking at the camera. So even though this is scrolling pretty quickly, you can see that the character Dan, who's Reed's, I forget his last name, he's giving the finger, right? Yep. So we have like a burst over that. The character who plays Jerry, I forget his name, but he's like, I told him, I was like, hey, I've got an idea. Like, you're rushing to this shoot, but you're politician, you don't have any time. You're going to give the photographer 5 minutes. So you have a whole narrative. And then I said, so you've just come from the men's room and someone tells you your fly's open. So his picture is he's zipping up his fly, which I can't believe he did. And then that's his magazine cover.
Wow.
Amy just got a really frightening text. So you can see there she is.
Yeah.
And then the woman who played Selena Meyer's daughter, she's got her baby and the baby doesn't like her.
Right.
So that baby's crying. Jonah is actually, initially I wanted him to be super tall because he's very tall, to have like part of his head cut off, because that would happen to his character, but we ended up not doing that. It's all like a lot of fun. And this was obviously a joy for me to work on, because once you start directing people, I mean, look at it, it's so great. I mean, not that because I worked on it, but because the collaborative effort was A+. And this photographer was Justin Stevens, who had also worked on the amazing Veep campaigns. And that bar was really high because you've got the picture that he did of Selena at the UN and she's asleep, which is so brilliant, such a great metaphor. So we didn't top it, and you don't have to top something, but again, we're celebrating what they've already made, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
a big mistake. That's like, it's not a finished section. So but you'll get an idea of, that's the idea of stuff I've worked on. And I have more sketches obviously, but it's like I'm still putting them together.
Okay. So it's Michele Romero.studio for this one.
Yeah, but then I have to like this is a sidebar. I have to like go back and get someone to like change because it's still a work in progress. So it has the
Right.
dummy email address or web address.
Yeah.
So what else? What other questions can you ask me?
Well, this has been great so far. I'm digging it. But
Yeah.
so did the whole photography thing, was this something you grew up with? Were you a photographer before you started doing all this as well
It's
as
a
now,
it,
or
it's a
did you go to
great
school?
question, and here's the answer. So my father was a photojournalist, and um he started off in the army. The story is that he was a painter. He went to art school and then he joined the army, and he was stationed in Germany, where he tells it that he was, some officer came in and was like, all right, we've got two jobs, tank duty, or we need a photographer. And so he raised his hand, was like, I'm a photographer. And then I guess figured it out.
Right.
And maybe he knew that. And who knows, he's a big storyteller. That could all be fiction. But so he followed like generals around for Stars and Stripes and did a bunch of, photography while he was in Germany, worked for the Frankfurt newspaper after that, then moved to the United States, worked for a Rhode Island newspaper, and then worked for the New York Times. So my parents
Wow.
divorced, really whatever. But my father, when we would visit him, because he lived in New York, sometimes we went on assignment with him, but I was very aware of what he did. We would hang out with him in the dark room when he was on deadline. It was like in those days, it was like, just hang out here.
Yeah.
So I'd watch him burn and dodge and have that little fly swatter. And, that was all intriguing as a kid, because you saw it in process. When I was in second grade, Time Magazine did a story about like what kids are doing at Christmas. So my dad shot my friends and my sister. We were in a magazine, and I can remember having that issue of Time, being like, I'm in a magazine,
Yeah.
I'm from the era where magazines were at their height, really.
Yeah.
I have like very exciting Spy magazine, Vanity Fair came back at that time. So I forget, but I did shoot in high school, and I photographed the kids I babysat for. I was the art director of our yearbook. I worked on the newspaper. So I already was doing stuff that I actually had a comic strip in the newspaper called
Oh, wow.
Academia Nuts. Um,
Macadamia nuts?
Academia.
Academia nuts. Okay.
Yeah. Already I was writing clever things. But
Yes.
so I was primed to head in that direction, even though I might not have been aware of it. So that is the backstory. I went to college, and then I kind of deviated because it was an era of finance and like Wall Street and
Yeah.
insider trading. So I ended up working for a finance insurance company for 18 months, and then I was like, this sucks, peace out, even though that language didn't exist in the late 80s. And then I just like started the groundwork for it. What I wanted to do was work for a magazine. What I knew I could get in, because I wasn't a writer, although later I would write. I knew it was like, okay, how do I get in there? And I talked to some people who said, well, you can be a photo editor, but you have to start off at a photo agency. So I did what kids did in those days. I went to the newsstand. I got all these magazines. I looked up the director of photography, sent them all a resume and a letter, by mail, because it's what we did in
Right.
those
Oh,
days.
yeah.
And then I did the same for photo agencies. So at that point, there was no Getty. It was
Yep.
like, Black Star and Gamma Liaison and Sigma, and I guess Outline was there. Like all this stuff's no longer in existence, really. And so I got a job working for this female photographer. I won't say her name or the agency, but the interview went like this: do you ride a bicycle? Yes, you're hired. So that was the
Okay.
easiest job interview I ever had. Now that meant that I was taking her portfolio. She had an agency, so there were a lot of people shooting events and concerts, and every week I would go to Time, Newsweek, People, Rolling Stone, and someplace, and Spin, and I would pitch them slides. So they'd look at a slide sheet and they'd take stuff for what celebrities are doing this week, like a news
Oh, wow.
section that some of them had, or random notes, which Rolling Stone had in the front of the book. So that was exciting. And I rode a bike in the city in the heat without a helmet. And one day the pedals came off, or I would take her portfolio to magazines. And that was like a heavy
Oh
case in
yeah.
those days in the front basket. And that's what I did. And I loved getting out of the office because she was a holy terror. I worked the front desk. I was the receptionist, and rock stars would come in and I'd be like, hey, so that was exciting. She asked me, and then I was an assistant. So she said, hey, do you want to work on this like really cool photo shoot this weekend and not get paid? Ultimately was the rest of that story. But it's like a really amazing, like one of the greatest rock star of all time. And I just went like Keith Richards, whatever I was going to
Right.
say. And it turned out to be just as good. It was Alice Cooper, right?
Oh,
And
cool.
so, I toted his golf bag up the elevator with him because he's with a golf outfit. And then he turned into Alice Cooper. And I realized, oh my God, this is a costume. Like here's the rack of leather pants with skull snaps down the side. And we brought in fire. It was the first time I saw real concept photography. And it was exciting to witness. I only lasted in that job for 8 months because, as the gods would have it, this photo editor came down to do research and I was filing slides. So I really do believe no job too small. Like Dan Winters sweeps the studio, and I come from that place. So I was doing everything. I'm filing slides. Some guy comes in looking for music pictures. We start talking, the Pixies are playing on the radio, on the stereo. So we start talking about music. And I was like, oh, I love blah, blah, blah. Because I was a big music nerd. And he said, we're starting a magazine. You should come up and interview for it. And I interviewed for the music photo editor job and I got it like pretty quickly, which is weird because I didn't know more than cutting up a 2 1/4 film and making sure you didn't, the responsibility of cutting that,
Yeah.
because if you cut into the film, you would ruin the image. And that was pre-retouching. So it was like,
Oh yeah.
don't fuck it up. It was very nerve-wracking. Or there'd be like where the clip was, it'd be like the staples or whatever. And that would, that image was not usable. And so I started a startup called Entertainment Weekly. I worked on the prototype cover, which I think was REM. I worked on the first cover, which was Katie Lang and Nina Cherry. And I believe my boss, like, I think I called about, we didn't go on shoots, didn't go on that shoot. And I believe, I was adhering to what my boss was doing for the cover, but I had to call in a picture of Nina Cherry. And somehow the record label in the UK gave me a number. I call it and I'm like, hey, looking for photographs of, Nina Cherry. And, oh, she's not here. And I was like, oh, who am I speaking with? She's like, this is her mother, so, and that was like, that was the launch of really what was a very joyful career for a really long time. There were moments where I didn't, was not having a great time, but for the most part, I really looked forward to going to work in the morning.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stress working on a weekly. I did a lot of obits. I love research. And so if I am sad that that's a practice that is really not of interest to the current generations. And I wish that were true. I started working with kids who had no idea what happened before they were born.
Right.
So it was an element of like, we were all super photo nerds. It wasn't just what we were covering. It was war photography, or we went to galleries or you figured out like who was the first guy who took a picture, which like Dan Winters could bring you that lecture. And then, we really got along with the nerds super well. We were just a group of nerds who were focused on, movies, film, same thing, books, television, and music. And it was, if I look back, like I have stories and I have amazing moments that I didn't, if you told me when I was 12 that like, hey, you're going to have Billy Joel's going to play nocturnes, Chopin nocturnes for you and just you,
Wow.
Chris Martin is also going to play the piano for you before the band gets there. And it's going to be just you there. You are going to be backstage with Kiss at Madison Square Garden before they went on, and
Oh, wow.
Fire. And that was amazing because it was one of the early jobs that I got to do. And like to see a limo come up out of the, from the garage up, or the just driving into the backstage area, Madison Square Garden. And my memory says that there was smoke that was coming out of the limo. meaning around it, like it was a fog machine, and or dry ice or whatever. And Gene Simmons comes out in full kiss boots, everything. And this little old lady comes waddling over to him, and she's like, Gene, I baked you a pie. And it was his mom, and she had like a foil wrapped pie. And just like things that you notice, like Peter Criss had on Reebok aerobics shoes because he's a drummer, and that made sense for like a drummer, so it's been like a really wild, weird journey. Like I got to work with David Bowie once, and my dog is named after Bowie, and he was so gracious, and it was like the sun walked into the room, talked to the crew, introduced himself to everyone, ate with the crew. And I celebrate that kind of behavior because that's like a real human being who has a lot of gratitude for what they get to do. I mean, it's like a really rarefied thing. So, and same for me, like that was I had gratitude going in, a supreme respect for what people got to do, the photographers, and also the talent. And then an understanding of like, this isn't for you. You have to think further than the image, which is like, it's going out into the universe. Can it be permanent? Can you make something like when Annie shot John Lennon and Yoko Ono the day that he was shot, and it happened to be that scenario, and John Lennon happened to take his clothes off and make that pose, and like then you have an iconic moment that even if he hadn't died that day would still be an iconic picture. I don't think most people know that he passed away, that he was shot that day.
Yeah.
And so that is a forever picture in my mind. Or even stuff that we look at, we've seen 1,000 times. That's exciting to me, that idea. And I'm not suggesting in a grandiose way that what I've made is forever, because I'm very aware that even a weekly is going to go by. But I'm hoping that at least for fans or even the talent, that was an exciting moment, because it was for me. And I really got to problem solve in a wonderful way at the tail end, because you finally, all the elements that come into your life where you figure out, oh, we can do it this way, or let's do it this way, or let's hire a pyro guy, let's blow up a car, which I did. One of my favorite photographers to work with also is Matthias Clamer. I don't know if you know his work at all. Clamer. And he and I had some amazing adventures, like really kind of everywhere. But we were shooting this band called Hot Hot Heat that were on Sub Pop for a cover of a music magazine that Entertainment Weekly had called Listen to This, which is a terrible name. But they let us do whatever we wanted on the cover because they weren't really paying attention to it. And so for Hot Hot Heat, I was like, well, what if we blew up a car? And the reason was like they were on the road and their car breaks down, but it's on fire because Hot Hot Heat, obviously. And then I think the cover was Drew Barrymore's Firestarter, just flames behind them. That's a big movie poster cliche anyway.
Yeah.
But we're shooting in Vancouver, which is amazing. But it right after 9/11? I think it was right after 9/11, or at least, yeah. And Matthias is German, but he's kind of swarthy looking and can pass for a lot of different nationalities, his own words. And then he had an assistant who's like a younger white guy. And then his notebook, because we were doing pyro, and he bought a car in Vancouver for like $500. I think it was a Mercedes too, that we knew we were going to set on fire, and then they gut it. So there's nothing in the interior, the pyro guys. And then there's they can shoot a flame up multiple times, but you have to have a fire department there. So Matthias has a notebook with sketches of like how he's going to buy a car and set it on fire, and like all these notes and drawings, And so I'm at the hotel in Vancouver, and he's like, hi, I'm stuck in immigration. So I think, oh my God, he's not going to get out of immigration because he's got this sketchbook and it's Canada, and it's terrorism. And you don't think these things are going to happen. You're like, that wasn't part of my like, what if that happens thing. So I ended up having to get on the phone with someone and say, he's a journalist. This is what we're doing. Entertainment Weekly, send them a letter, fax a letter over to them. And, he got through. And it was amazing. We had a fire department there. They had to alert the entire neighborhood that this would be going on. There was a road where people kept calling the fire department, and they would say, like, there's a car on fire in I think it was Barnaby where we were shooting. So, that's another privilege of a band being super excited because we gave them something to do. And remember that a lot of bands, I would always say, like, I don't want to just shoot four guys up against a wall.
Yeah.
No, that's not anything. That's lazy, So we got to do a lot of ideas with bands, and it was super exciting. Green Day, we flew up to their studio in Oakland, right? They're a Bay Area band.
Right.
And because they were recording American Idiot, I think that was the records. They're in the recording studio that's their recording studio in Oakland. And I think the publicist, who's my friend Brian Bunbury, said, they've got go-karts there. So maybe you could do something, in the studio and then go-karts. So we scout, and they do go-kart racing in the parking lot there. So the idea actually that we came with was we wanted it to look like the band had crashed into the cover, and the cover was made of glass. So it was like shattered.
Oh yeah.
And then they would have a go-kart race. And so that was kind of mid Photoshop era. And Matthias is so good at post-production. So he had the go-karts on their side, and there was an Apple box underneath the one we would take out in post. So it looked like they were coming in and wheeling, on the side, and it was easy to get them to do crazy stuff. I believe that we took Billy Joe Armstrong's tie and like rigged it so it looked like it was flying, had like wire on it, things like that. The way that we did the broken glass, Matthias, like you put two pieces of glass over and you shatter the interior one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I don't remember, something like that, but and it's so great to work with someone who knows what they're doing. So then all of a sudden they have a guy who comes out on stage dressed as a pink rabbit, and he comes out of the recording studio. This giant pink rabbit comes out, and I'm like, holy shit, that's amazing. Come here, and I said, can you be, so he has a checkered flag, and it's like he's doing the race. He happens to have a bottle of beer, which we leave in. And then my boss at that time, the managing editor, got really pissed, because he said, you have drinking and driving, like we can't have that. And I was like, oh fuck, so anytime something like that happens, you will forever look for that. You'll forever look for, we can't do drinking and driving. It would never have occurred to me at that point. So that's still one of my favorite pictures, because the joy of the evolution of how that worked out, again, 100% like participation, and then serendipity. Like if there's a moment that comes on, you like embrace it and run with it. And again, thrilling picture. Band loved it, fans love it, publicist loves it, magazine loves it. There's just enthusiasm all around,
Yeah.
And I don't know how long you want me to talk, but
you can talk as long as you want. I'm digging
okay.
this.
So the last thing, no, it wasn't the last thing I worked with him on, but one of my favorite pictures that Matthias did, and there's a lot of them, was we had the job came in to shoot Jimmy, who's the guy who does, why can't I think of it? James Corden.
Oh yeah.
For Carpool Karaoke, so
yeah.
I was like, well, what if he was on top of a car that was in a pool, because Keith Moon famously drove his car into a pool. There's a section, or there's a scene in a Pink Panther movie where Inspector Clouseau loses the brakes on his like little truck thing and ends up in the pool. Oasis had a cover where they replicated the Keith Moon idea and had put I guess it was a Bentley in the pool.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd already had enough references, right? And I thought one of the ideas is like, what if the car is mid-flight, but you can't really do that? So what if the car has already landed in the pool and he's standing on top of it? Because obviously car, pool, and he's singing, I think, into a mic. Then it's like you pitch it, and I vaguely knew how we might be able to pull it off. Yeah, there it is. And what's amazing is, you pitch it, you've got the references. I did a sketch of this that I no longer have. Talent approves it. And then thing is, how are we going to make that happen? Okay, so we bought another car for like $500. I think, no, this was the Mercedes. And he gets photographed in a studio because obviously we can't risk talent. And so the car was there, it's propped up. The psych, it has a blue, like, plastic, not a drop cloth, but some kind of thing, so that we get the blue color the light will be bouncing onto the car, and you can see a little bit of the purple on the left side. And that wasn't ultimately that necessary, but I mean, I guess it was. I don't want to say that. And then, he's kind of surfing on it. Then we're done with it. He's got a beautiful suit on because, again, didn't want him to be cheesy. Didn't, even though Nick next to him is in a bathing suit, we still wanted it to be a talk show guy. And he's James Corden, so he's happy. Suit's great, fits him beautifully. He leaves the studio. He actually did a bunch of other things that were really great also. That was a very, that shoot had a lot of great images to use. So then I keep calling Matthias and I was like, hey, so we've 2 weeks, we've got it. Like, let's talk about how we're going to do the car in the pool. And he's like, okay, I've got some pools out, out in the desert I'm looking at, cannot find a pool. And then he stops calling me and I was like, hey, Matthias, Michelle, just checking in. Where are we with the pool? And I finally get him and he's like, okay, I'm moving to a new house and I'm on the phone with a crane company. So I think we can lift the car over my house because there's a pool there. And I was like, no, dude, that's a bad plan, because I always think through a lot. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? It crashes into the house, then liability. What if someone gets hurt? All that. So I remembered watching a documentary about like how they shot Titanic, and they're in a tank, which just looks like an above ground pool.
Right.
So I then say, let's get an above ground pool. So we buy one somewhere like around San Francisco or Fresno or something, truck it down. And it costs like $200. Like, it's not that expensive. I don't remember what it cost actually. And then we built the pool around it. So you drive the car onto the pool. It's big enough to fit it, blow it up. It happens to be a blue interior, fill it with water, the car. Maybe he tilted the car again to have that exact water line. And it's a Photoshop job, but it's a seamless Photoshop job.
Yeah, it looks great.
What I love about it is, like, again, you can hear the problem solving. And you get to a stuck place. You're like, well, that's not going to work. But wait, what else can we do? And you can hear when I talk, the things that are trapped in my brain as ideas. So you get those from everywhere and you keep like using those, like the coffee cup idea, which I may have seen somewhere, not all ideas are original by any means.
Right. Yeah.
But then to have it work for something else and so beautifully, it's just like you keep it going. And that, like, honestly, that's the thrill of it. I'm not don't work at the New York Times sending guys out to Afghanistan. I'm purely like a pop culture, fanatic. And to get to do those pieces was extraordinary. And you can hear like the collaboration with photographers, also extraordinary, and I rarely had a moment where, we would fight sometimes, but it usually went like this. You could do that. Let's try it, is what I would say. Right. You can do that, and knowing that I wasn't going to run it. And they would come up with like, you're going to not run it. I'm like, okay, but you'll still have the picture. I don't care.
Yeah.
But, stuff like that.
I like that attitude. Even if you're not going to do it, you at least give the photographer whoever the option.
Yeah,
and try it.
And I know I've come across as like, all these ideas are mine and I'm amazing. That's not true. Ideas come from everywhere. The prop person could have an idea that you add. The ideas had to come from me with photographer collaboration. Right. They would send ideas that were fantastic. And we would bundle those into whatever the pitch was. And again, everything had to go through my office first, my boss, the creative director, the managing editor. And that was, sometimes hard too, because you'd have to go back 10 more ideas, more ideas. And So on a set, what is great is when you come up with an idea on set, or the talent. We're like, what if I did this way? Like Colbert was a perfect example of, we had some ideas that we went with, but he just made 1,000 more things happen. Same with if you work with Amy Sedaris, you maybe build the platform or you build the set, and that person turns it upside down or does something
Right.
wonderful that didn't occur to you. The best example of that is Turla Lilligrabben, whose work I love. Also, we had him shooting. We did a cover of the band. Oh my God, what's the band's name? Black Keys. The Black Keys.
Yeah.
Two guys, Patrick, and I'm forgetting the other guy's name. But they had what's his name? I'm like failing on names right now. I'm tired. Who's the comedian on Eastbound and Down?
God, okay. Yes.
Look that up for a minute. It's now I'm like old person memory loss.
Yeah, I'm terrible.
Danny McBride.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Danny McBride. It will come eventually.
Hey, you hit it at the same time I got it up on Google, so that's perfect.
Danny McBride was interviewing the Black Keys because he's a fan, right? And they're friends. And that seemed like it was a great idea because it was not the typical, like, there they are in the coverage, 2-shot. So I had the idea. I was like, well, what if it's a hostage situation? Like, when the kidnapper or whatever says, we have ways to make you talk, right? And so that was the idea. And Danny McBride's going to go to town on that. John Patrick. Oh man, there's a John Patrick, is it Anderson? Who's a prop stylist. He was on that job, and I would call him and say, hey, Danny McBride is interviewing the Black Keys. Here are a couple things that I want. Some prop ideas, and things that he might threaten them with. So like a fire extinguisher, no guns, because we didn't do guns, but like a baseball bat, a taser, whatever you could think of that could be used for that purpose. We tied them up with rope to chairs. We gave one of the musicians a black eye, and they were up for it. Like they were meant to look beleaguered. And then more magic happened, because we were going to have a shot where the guitarist had a guitar and the drummer had drumsticks. And I said, but Patrick, John Patrick, he has a company called Acme in Brooklyn. He is a wonderful nutter and has so many wonderful props. So he comes in, like, he'd call me and he's like, hey, do we need a hot dog cart? And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think we're going to use these, because I have one. He kept calling me with these ideas. I'm like, I don't think the hot dog cart, we're shooting at Milk Studios in New York. But he comes with like a brilliant amount of things. And some of them I don't, he's like, I brought Mylar balloons. I don't know if we could use them. He brought a gurney, like a hospital gurney. And I was like, I don't even know what that's for, but it's hilarious. And what else did he bring? He had a whole bunch of taxidermy. So great. So I said to Danny, here's like your paint box. Do whatever you want. Like, we can give you, we'll like lead the witness, but just go for it, whatever you want to do. So he gets out. There's this moment that I love this picture so much, where the band have like a guitar, the drumsticks, and Danny like goes over to the tables of props, and he pulls out this taxidermied coyote, right? And then he starts playing it like it's a guitar. Like, he uses the teeth as, like, I guess it's the fret, he's like playing the body of this coyote. And then the next thing that happens is he gets the amplifier and he plugs the cord into the ass of the coyote. And we're laughing so hard because, again, those guys are brilliant. And so with comedians, you're like, give them a bunch of props, let them go to town. You give them freedom. And the same with the photographer, although within limitations if their ideas suck. Just kidding. So that was, again, a perfect example of a joyful moment. We're all cracking up. So then you've done your job.
You have amazing stories.
I do have amazing stories, but I've been at this a long time. And I really liked it. I liked doing
Yeah.
that part of the job. So yeah.
What would be the craziest or strangest thing that happened?
Hmm. I won't talk about, like, there were crazy, it's like sometimes a crazy thing would happen where you're like, I can't, usually it was like something that didn't happen where you're like, I cannot believe that this isn't going to work out, and usually it
Right.
would be before we even got to any kind of part, just like people asking stupid questions or pitching things. Without getting anyone to, I think I'll tell this story because it actually is out there. Early on, also very early retouching era, the band TLC we were photographing,
Yeah.
and the photographer was Guy Rock, who is great, and I love
Mhm.
him. And the band, I don't think we're getting along. They definitely weren't getting along, and they didn't have a publicist, but they had a road manager, and there wasn't really anyone pulling them together. I didn't know they were in a fight, but they're in hair and makeup. They're getting ready. We're just shooting a nice shot of them in a car, like a convertible that had come into the studio. But then it started leaking oil, so that was like a money that we had to pay.
Uh,
But at one point, the road manager comes up to me and she says, "Michelle, I got to tell you something." I'm like, "What?" "Left eye left." And I'm like, "Left eye left, right eye right." Like, I didn't know what she meant. Is this like Twister? Um, and Left Eye Left, she's like, she went to go meet with Puffy about her solo career. So they like broke up essentially
on
on the
set.
set. And so I'm like, I can't shoot two of them. So she came back later and we added her into the picture in Photoshop. And that then became a story that was on like a VH1 Behind the Music. So that was kind of like
Oh wow.
memorable in terms of that happening. And then I guess, what's the craziest story? I did have, well, Britney Spears, but that's for different reasons. Although that shoot ended up fine. I mean, some of the stuff I can't talk about
Yeah.
because, you know, NDA for life is what I like to say. But I've gotten to see a lot of wonderful stuff, some very crazy stuff. Um, I had one photographer I worked with whom I absolutely hated, who was such a jerk to me because I guess he had been a creative director,
Uh,
wasn't following what I want, that maybe two, and that kind of stuff would happen. And I was like, I guess I never have to work with you again. And then they wonder what happened. I was like, don't be a jerk, like we're doing something super fun. And I'm not sure why you're like, I have to come home with these assets, whatever. So I know here's the most fun I've had in terms of, again, I don't know how this is going to work out, but um we were shooting Breaking Bad, the two Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston,
yeah.
right before I think it was they were about to do the last table read for the last episode of Breaking Bad. And I flew to Albuquerque, and the ideas were we were going to photograph them in like beautiful suits. I don't remember who made this, let's just say Gucci suits or whatever. Um, and that the idea was that these guys were celebrating the end of some kind of heist or shootout, and so there would be like they'd be in these beautiful suits, but the suits would be dirty and bloody because they'd just been through, and the viewer wouldn't know what it was, so it'd be like a nice mystery. There you go. And see how similar these are. And in fact, The Walking
Yeah.
Dead would have been inspired by that would have been a reference, and it
Oh,
worked
okay.
out well for both of them. um yeah, Red Velvet Cake because the blood celebrate, whatever. Anyway, so get out there. One of the ideas is that they are going to go out in the desert, and we're going to have like a living room set, and they're going to be drinking cognac like they just finished up whatever they were doing. But it was too windy that day, and we were going to go like 2 hours away, and the production team had to cancel it because you would get sand in the cameras, and like you
Oh
can't
yeah.
shoot with those kind of winds. So then you go, oh, our big idea, we're not going to get to do it. I hope this works out. And one of the ideas we also had was that they were going to be in hazmat suits, like the yellow hazmat suits, like
Right.
superheroes, and coming, undoing that, and there would be a suit underneath, like a formal suit. So, and then of course we start out clean because we needed straight up pictures of them, and then we would go towards bloody dirty, because once you go in that direction with the cake and everything, it has to be the last shot because you can't clean them up. I mean, you can, but it would take a long time.
Oh
So
yeah.
you plan it that way. And I was on the monitor. I just had a knee surgery. So like I also have a cane, which is useful because then the talent feels a little sorry for you. No, they were great. I think also there were no publicists on set, which is a key ingredient to getting
Does
what
that make
you
it
want done.
better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing for Walking Dead, just had the show publicist, who's a great person, Brandy Brooks. And I'm watching the monitor. I believe someone's agent was there. So we're both watching the monitor, and Alexi Hayes, one of my favorite photographers, was the photographer, great friend. And he looked at me at one point. He's like, let's just shoot like in the sound stage's doorway, because the light was beautiful coming in. And we referred to it as God's light. Let's use God's light, So it was shot in daylight. And I knew these guys were going to get beaten up, got to work with the prop guys. We built a version of like the glasses that Walter White wore that were cracked. Like I had them doing some stuff. We had a lot of meth on set. The blue meth was, is rock candy. So that was interesting. I actually went back to the office with blue meth, went through the airport. My bag gets pulled. And I was like, well, it's candy, so it doesn't matter. I thought it was like because of the blue meth and the little baggies and a bigger baggie.
Right.
And instead they were like, your shampoo bottle's too big. Like, okay. But they got so dirty so quickly, and they had like dirt in like nylon stockings, so that they'd hit each other with the dirt, and it got like super dirty. And the prop blood, which you can only imagine works as an adhesive. Right. So I start panicking because I'm like, oh my God, I didn't get enough stuff of them just in their suits looking handsome. And I don't think there was much, but I saw it happen in real time. And I'm sitting at the monitor going, fuck, I'm so fucked, And I remember flying home and thinking I'm going to get yelled at. Like there's going to be also, Jess Cagle, my boss at the time, it's going to be furious, like you imagine all these things. And so I had the shittiest plane ride home in my head only. Get to the office and they're like, oh my God, there's so many great pictures. And there was a great photograph. What I learned from Bryan Cranston. So I think we were doing two covers. One was like, say, fall TV, or it was an insert. I can't remember, but we did them in normal, like whatever their characters would wear or whatever casual clothes. And we were giving a nod to whether or not the characters died. And again, we had props that they'd bought, and Bryan Cranston went and got a skull, and he was holding the skull. And then he saw this book that was originally, the skull was just a prop for the desert living room thing, because there'd be a skull on the coffee table, something that looked like a leather bound Bible. So he grabs the book, and Aaron Paul is holding the skull above his head. Aaron's up here, skull, Bryan Cranston, leather book that was not a Bible. And he said, if you show a skull, fans are going to read into it and think that I've died, and so you just give them stuff to lead them. And then the Bible is going to look like a Bible. He closed his eyes. So it was we didn't know it was going to happen at that point, but it would send the audience, the fans, the readers into a kind of Reddit frenzy,
Not bad.
But at the end of the day, I brought it back, and they went with a super bloody cover, which is really not an EW idea, but it was great, worked out super well. We also had pictures of them in their suits with like gas masks on, drinking, cognac, kind of celebration. But for Bryan Cranston, I'll finish with this. We had prop money, which I learned cannot look like real money because it's illegal. So it's like Benjamin Franklin, but his face is really fat. Like you change it enough so that it's like movie money, and we had it in a big gym bag. And each dollar bill, each like bill cost like $20 to make. I don't know if that's true, but that's what the prop guy said to me, maybe so I wouldn't steal it. But Bryan Cranston has like blood all over him, dirt all over him. And he starts like pasting all this money all over himself. And it's both a grim picture and a beautiful picture. And he made that, he made that happen himself.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of it is
Wow.
like, let the talent go.
You really do have some cool stories. You have a fun life, fun career so far.
Yeah, yeah. And now I'm like figuring out what my next half, or not half, but my next iteration will be. But yeah, no, it was thrilling. It was loved being on set.
Do you have ideas of what you want to do next?
I started, if you on my Instagram, I started doing this thing called Good Night, which is I was leaving my office in New York, often very late, and I had the iPhone with has a good camera on it. I just started taking pictures of the night lights, and I'd be attracted by the light, and I didn't know where it was headed. It was just something I'd post. Then I moved out to LA, and I was like, well, this is a challenge. People
Yeah.
actually said to me, they're like, are we still going to get night photos from LA? And I didn't think anything of it. And then I was like, okay, it's a challenge. And it was just a graphic challenge. I'd be again at work late, but our offices were in Wilshire. And then the night was beautiful because we were on the 17th floor. So I'd shoot from above, and it was again just for fun. And so
Right.
I made a book during COVID, and I'm gonna see where that goes. Like I'll send
Cool.
you a copy, but so I'm like learning how to do that. I'm a really good editor, so I was able to edit it. And like I gave a copy to Dan Winters, whom I just visited, and he's a dear friend. And like Dan Winters liked that book. Dan Winters told me like, I was looking at your book again this morning. It's really great. So I'm super lucky. And Dan and I have been on amazing adventures together, and he's one of my dearest friends and an amazing nerd.
But
And
didn't you say you guys just did something together recently?
well, the last thing I did with him was a Breaking Bad reunion, and that was amazing because we also did props. So we worked with Vince Gilligan to get props together to shoot. And it was like, and then also we were shooting at Sony, I think a studio where they have an archive that's like a museum. So I went there and there's all this Breaking Bad stuff, like Walter White's ID for his school teaching
Oh,
job, and
wow.
the Heisenberg hat and the glasses. And so I said, we did this for Walking Dead also, do props, because the prop department is doing amazing work, and let's take beautiful pictures of this stuff. So we had Herschel's head because he'd been beheaded on Walking Dead, and that was an animatronic, like mouth moving. And so Dan would work it and like make the mouth say like stupid stuff. He's like, oh, like whatever. And then so we got Vince Gilligan as a production office in the Valley. And so we got, I called the publicist, like, do you know where Danny Trejo's head is? Because he gets beheaded also,
Right.
and it rides the turtle in the like first season. And yeah, Vince has it, so Vince like brings it to his office. We go to his office, and I have pictures of Dan with the head just on a table before we start. He sets up a little studio, shoots the thing. And then I would meet Danny Trejo like within the last year. I think I ran into him. I was at an event where he was at, and I was like, hey. And I showed him a picture on my phone. I was like, I've got your head. And I told him what it was for. And he's like, I'm gonna need that. You gotta get my number, like his guy, which never ended up happening. But it was, it was like you see this stuff and it's amazing. And also Gus Fring's head that gets blown up halfway. And
Oh, yeah.
I knew about that because Greg Nicotero, who's the effects guy and also a director, executive producer on Walking Dead, he made those effects. So once I got to visit these really talented human beings, that became completely intriguing. My Walking Dead experience was all about knowing how these really talented people on movie sets like that then implemented what we were able to do for the Peter Jackson, like create, like really, I don't know that there's another magazine that got people into character to that degree, where we really worked with prop people. John Sanders was the prop master on Walking Dead, and he taught me how they get blood to come off a sword, to fly off a sword. You put like alcohol on it to prop blood, and then it slides off, and you get those splatter
Oh,
effects.
yeah. Wow.
We had Andrew Lincoln. I wanted him to be punching towards the set, towards the camera, so you wouldn't know if he was punching a zombie or an enemy or his, you know, I don't know, punching, but whatever.
Right.
And he's punching into a sponge that's soaked with blood that's in a large, like some kind of, what is it, like a bucket of some kind, like a larger bucket.
Yeah.
And so, and then there's plexi on the camera, so he's shooting at it and the blood splatters coming off. That is just a beautiful arc of blood, you know, liquid. And he's getting caught on his face or stuff. So you watch that happen, you're like, oh, that's how they do that. For still magazine photography, I wouldn't know that unless I got to go on the sets.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Damn, so I've talked your ear off.
It's amazing. And I'm sure we could talk for another God knows how long.
Yeah. So
stories you got.
Yeah. So it's probably a decent place to stop. You know, I'm also working with photographers as like a consultant. I like working with young photographers who, because I'm like, I've got a lot of experience.
Yeah.
I need to share that because why not? And that's been really gratifying to get people to a better place. I love doing research. I worked on a book. You know, I'm not touting what I'm doing now because I'm just sort of figuring it out, but I'm definitely pivoting because magazines don't do this kind of work anymore. There's not a budget for it.
Yeah, for sure. If a photographer wants to work with you or consult with you, have you consult with them? Do they just hit you up on Instagram?
Yep, they do. I'm working with a bunch of young, you know, they could be old. It depends on what they want, what they can do. And essentially what my skill set is, I'm like, here's what your work looks like. Where do you want to go? Here's how you get there. You know, I can't change, like you can't give someone talent. But you can give them direction and more professionalism, and certainly a history or references that they can go to and go, oh, like, why don't you look at this work? Because everything leads to something else. Like, so you can see, like, historically, everything I got to work on, I would use eventually something, even if it's what not to do. You know, don't show them the monitor because then they'll like stop it and you know, makeup stuff and so
I learned that a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I also learned over
COVID
camera. That if they're watching live on like a Zoom thing or whatever, stop sharing your screen until you're actually shooting, because they will pick apart your test shots when you're trying to figure out your lighting and get your lighting set. They'll go, wait a minute, I don't like, that's too dark. You know, yeah, well, that was literally, I pulled the camera up just to make sure it was working with the computer.
I have like, the printer that we had in our office, we had beautiful color printers and probably spent so much money because I think it's like $1 a printout, or that's probably a lie, but it printed really dark, you know, so the blacks came out really saturated. So we'd show something and our boss at the time would say, it's really dark. And I'm like, no, it's not really that dark. It's just, and I'd explain the printer prints more black. So I'd have to pull the images into Photoshop and open them shadows up.
Yeah.
And even then they'd be dark to like show what it would really look like, which was an extra effort, but needed to, get stuff through.
Oh, I get it.
So it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this has been wonderful. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for reaching out.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing it.